300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. A lot to discuss in the NBA. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter show, but all NBA, the play-in games that took place last night, previewing the 2 play-in games that are taking place tonight. So we're going to have some fun. There's a lot to talk about, but I have to start with the first play-in matchup from last night, the Brooklyn Nets and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So it's official. It's official. We can put this to bed. We can put away all the cynicism and the skepticism. The Brooklyn Nets are officially in the playoffs. They officially clinched the 7th seed. They will take on the Boston Celtics. So let's start with the positives for the Brooklyn Nets. The positives are they're in. Again, no more doubt. They have officially made it into the postseason, and they're lethal. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are one of the best duos in the NBA, arguably the best duo in the NBA. They are solidifying that every time they go out and they put performances on like that, like what they did last night. Kyrie Irving, 34 points, made his first 12 consecutive shots, finished 12 for 15 overall from the floor. Durant poured in a measly 25, 5 and 11 on, again, over 50% shooting, 3 blocks, 2 steals. So those 2 guys alone are so explosive, are so lethal, that they're always going to give the Brooklyn Nets a chance. They're going to keep them in a game. They're going to keep them in a series as long as those 2 guys stay healthy. So that's one of the positives, is when you have them clicking at the right time. And again, the postseason is not a time where either of those 2 guys shrink. They play some of their best basketball. They're not afraid of the moment. They're not afraid to play at home, on the road, on Pluto. Does not matter. They'll play you any place, anytime, anywhere, and they're going to show up. The other positive is there's a real possibility that Ben Simmons could be returning to the lineup. So not only are you adding some defensive presence and an element of defense to your roster, which is obviously one of the main reasons why they traded for Ben Simmons was because of his playmaking, but also his defensive ability. This is a guy who was all first-team defensive team in the NBA last year, 3-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year. He's not going to be asked to score at all, even if he's playing 10 to 15 minutes a game. There's some real optimism that he's going to be returning now officially for the first round of the Eastern Conference Finals. And the other addition that, or the other kind of benefit to having Ben Simmons that I think people don't really talk about enough, is the fact that the Nets aren't really a deep team. This adds another player. This adds a little bit more depth to an already pretty shortened lineup. So now you lessen the burden on Seth Curry as he's recovering from an ankle. You lessen the burden on Andre Drummond, on Patty Mills, on Nick Claxton. And it adds, again, just another body to have on this Brooklyn Nets team. So you lessen the minutes that are going to be logged by Kyrie and by KD. Maybe that average is 2 to 3 minutes less per game. But even that, over the course of an entire postseason run, can be huge. That can be an absolutely difference maker. So that's two. The third positive is they've managed to still hum this whole season without Joe Harris. I don't know how. Somehow Joe Harris's injury has flown under the radar. No one seems to be talking about it, but that's a huge absence that they're missing. A sniper from three, a 6'7" wing who isn't a great defender, but another body to throw in there. So you're playing without him. He stretches the floor. He plays with confidence. He opens up the floor for Kyrie and KD a little bit more. So they've managed to still dance around without him and still play well without him. And here's the final positive if you're the Brooklyn Nets. You're facing the Boston Celtics, who are likely going to be without Robert Williams for some of the games. And if he is returning, he's going to be a compromised Robert Williams. Time Lord is not going to be the full Time Lord that we're accustomed to seeing. So from the Brooklyn Nets perspective, having the Celtics miss one of their best defensive players is absolutely ginormous. And I even thought, even if they had Robert Williams going into that matchup, that was one of the few first-round matchups, assuming that they couldn't advance ahead of a 6 or a 5 or 4 seed. They'd have to be relegated to playing a 1, 2, or 3 seed. That was one of the better matchups that they could have faced. I thought had they faced the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round, it would be night out. It would be lights out. Their night is over. But because they faced the Boston Celtics, who, yes, do possess some challenges defensively, which I'll touch on, this was not the worst first-round matchup for them to have. And obviously, Bruce Brown made some comments yesterday in the postgame, previewing the matchup against the Celtics. And as oftentimes young players do, he added some bulletin board material for the Celtics, claiming that the absence of Robert Williams is going to be massive for the Celtics, that they're going to take advantage of that. They're going to exploit Al Horford in the middle, yada, yada, yada. Kevin Durant quickly tried to quash that in his post-game remarks, saying, let's just play. We can't overlook our opponent. He's been in this situation before. So obviously that was not the wisest thing to do, is to add extra motivation, fuel your opponents even more, but you live and you learn. But here are the cons if you're the Brooklyn Nets, especially based on last night's performance. You face the Cleveland Cavaliers in the play-in game. You played a young, adolescent Cleveland Cavaliers team that has overachieved. And as impressive as they've been all season, you're going to be facing more difficult teams in the postseason. Most notably, they led the Cavs by 20 after the first quarter, and they allowed that same young Cavaliers team to crawl back into single digits before halftime and even in the fourth quarter. And that's going up against Darius Garland, who, granted, Darius Garland is a very good player. He dropped 30 points. He should be in the running for NBA's most improved player. This is no shade on him. He is a fantastic up-and-coming star in this league. A young Evan Mobley. You're playing against the Cavs without Jared Allen, one of their two trees in the middle that anchors them defensively. He's a defensive stalwart along with Evan Mobley, so you didn't have to go up against him. You're going up against an aged Kevin Love, Cedi Osman. So this isn't exactly the most prolific offensive team, and yet they managed to put up nearly enough points to stay within striking distance. So that's a little bit concerning. The fact that you couldn't hold a substantial lead against a Cavaliers team that's lacking a lot of firepower. Defensively, they've always been good all year, but offensively, they haven't necessarily been one of the most prolific scoring teams in the league. So that's a little bit concerning. The other thing that's a little bit concerning for the Brooklyn Nets is as it relates to their matchup against the Celtics have one of the best, obviously, they're the best defensive team in the league. But what they're overlooking, even with the absence of Robert Williams, is they are really good defensively along the perimeter. You have Marcus Smart, you have Jaylen Brown, you have Jason Tatum. Now, granted, those are their go-to guys when it comes to offense, but you can put Smart on Kyrie. You can put Jaylen Brown on KD and allow Jason Tatum to kind of roam a little bit more defensively. And that length along the perimeter is exactly the type of length that if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you don't ideally want to face. Now, no one's saying that they're going to be able to shut them down, but it'd be one thing if defensively the Celtics were stout because of their interior guys and they were kind of porous along the perimeter. That's not the case. Their length along the perimeter is what's allowed them to funnel guys into Robert Williams to make shots difficult. Now, they don't have Robert Williams right now, but they still have the length along the perimeter. And so I think that that's going to pose some challenges. Now, ultimately, if I had to bet with my life, am I taking the Celtics over the Brooklyn Nets? Probably not. Truthfully, I think the Nets are going to win the series. I think they're probably going to win in 6 or 7 games. And that's not a knock on Jason Tatum. That's not a knock on Ime Udoka, who I think obviously should be in consideration for NBA Coach of the Year. He's done a fantastic job with the Celtics, transforming the culture, instilling a new defensive backbone into this team. And I love what they've been getting off the bench with Peyton Pritchard, who's come in and actually done a really nice job with them. Grant Williams has managed to evolve his game and be a really valuable and invaluable player for them. So I like the Celtics a lot. I just think that KD and Kyrie in this first round series is a little bit too much, and they're going to apply a little bit too much pressure offensively for the Celtics. So I think that's probably going to be a 6 or 7 game series, but those were the pros and cons for the Brooklyn Nets. But at the end of the day, they managed to, again, circumvent all these potholes and these ditches with Kyrie and the whole vaccination status and players in and out and the whole James Harden saga. They managed to get around all of that, and they're in the playoffs. So congratulations to them. And there was one other play-in game that took place yesterday. The Clippers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if you only watched the highlights of last night's game, you'd probably come away thinking Minnesota Timberwolves won the NBA Finals. Not really, but they celebrated like it. You had Patrick Beverley and Anthony Edwards climbing on the scorer's table, taking off the shirts, riling up the fans, throwing their jersey into the stadium. And that's what Patrick Beverley's going to do. And I'm going to touch on his performance. And obviously, it was a highly emotional and emotionally charged game for him personally, going up against the Clippers, going up against the team that basically said, sorry, sayonara to you. They didn't want to pay him. And so this was personal for Patrick Beverley. And he obviously let his emotions overflow at the end of the game in probably what was the most overrated celebration for a play-in game. It's not even like they won a series where even if you win a first-round series, we think that's over the top. To win one play-in game, to have that type of celebration was a bit over-dramatic, but needless to say, they've clinched it, and they clinched the 7th seed. They're in the playoffs officially. So what was striking to me about this game was, for the majority of the game, this looked like your typical Clippers team from a season ago. They led by 10 with about 8:45 left. And it was a surprise that they allowed that game to slip away, because that's typically a team, what we've seen from them over the last postseason run that they had under Ty Lue, was that's a game that they're going to typically close down the stretch. They were playing confidently on the road. They're executing, especially in the half court, which is where they've excelled. Without Kawhi all year, They've just kind of gone Paul George back over the last couple weeks, reintegrating him into the lineup. But this was surprising that they couldn't close this deal. But that's partly because you have to give credit to Minnesota for the guys that stepped up on their end. I thought that the difference in the game in the second quarter, D'Angelo Russell and Naz Reid kind of saved the day for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first half, because Karl Anthony Towns was playing recklessly and careless basketball. He's committing all these careless personal fouls. He committed 4 fouls and only had 2 points in the first half. 4 fouls in the first half. Anthony Edwards was battling foul trouble as well in the first half. He had 3 fouls in the first half. So the final couple minutes of the second quarter, you had D'Angelo Russell orchestrating everything and Naz Reid cleaning up the glass. And I want to give credit to D'Angelo Russell because, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, this is not to throw shade on him, this is not to knock him as a player. I truly thought that last night was the first legitimate time in his career that he lived up to the contract that he signed. He signed a 4-year, $117 million contract a couple years ago when he did that sign and trade with the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets. And he scored 29 points. He was controlling the pace. He was controlling the tempo. They were running the offense through him, especially when Karl Anthony Towns couldn't stay on the floor or Anthony Edwards wasn't out there. They allowed D'Angelo Russell to, again, just orchestrate and get them into sets and create shots for himself off the dribble or to create switches with his dribble. And I thought that he did a magical job slowing down the pace in the half court, getting the Timberwolves into offensive sets. And I have to give him credit because he signed a contract that was an all-star caliber worthy contract, and he played probably arguably his best game of his career in his most meaningful and most impactful game that he's ever played in his career. We forget he played in Kobe's last game. It feels like ages ago. But D'Angelo Russell stepped up to the plate, and he's what allowed the Timberwolves, along with the next guy I'm going to talk about, to kind of spark them on that 16-2 run and then a 21-5 run to close the game. And so this is what kind of leads into Anthony Edwards, because Anthony Edwards has arrived. This was kind of Anthony Edwards' postseason coming out party. 30 points. Apologies. I had to sneeze for a sec. 30 points, 10 for 21 from the floor, 5 for 11 from the three-point line. He was explosive, getting all the way to the rim, hitting step-back threes. He scored 9 points in the fourth quarter to help close the deal. A couple big late shots for the Timberwolves to close the deal. He was one of those 5 guys I thought coming into the season was going to have a breakout year. It was going to take that next step. And he's backed it up. He's backed it up. He's playing with all kinds of confidence. And it's great to see because we haven't seen the Minnesota Timberwolves, again, qualify and advance to the postseason. We saw it in a long time. We saw it happen once in 2018 where you had Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins that flamed out, fizzled out pretty quickly. Prior to that, you have to go back to the Kevin Garnett days back in 2004 was the last time that we had seen that. And again, just the way that he managed to get his own shot off, it's not always the prettiest looking shot. He's still refining it. But to be the number 1 overall pick and to be backing it up, major shout out to him. And then finally, listen, I've come to the realization that Patrick Beverley is just a winning basketball player. We've always known he's been scrappy. We've always known he's been a hardworking, feisty, defensive, just nightmare. And he's always been a nuisance defensively, again, in a good way. But that hasn't always necessarily meant that we viewed him as a winning player. But I think that we're starting to see a change in the narrative when it comes to Patrick Beverley, because this is not just someone who you signed to your team for some project. This is a guy that's going to change the culture. He's going to bring a winning culture to your organization. And I think we've started to see now that every single place that he's been, he's kind of been the linchpin to a lot of these good teams that he's been on. Whether it's the Clippers or the Rockets, he's been tremendous. He's been setting the tone. He's been establishing that defensive culture. And I think that most importantly, his enthusiasm, his energy, it's contagious. And he's infused this new sense of confidence and belief in the Minnesota Timberwolves that I think they were lacking. They were lacking an edge. He brought an edge to this team. And that's part of the reason why you're seeing them turn the corner this past year. A lot of these guys, I mean, yes, Anthony Edwards is newer, is only in his second season, but Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, those two guys have been a part of the Minnesota Timberwolves for a while. But what did we always say about Karl-Anthony Towns? That he was soft, that he didn't lack that consistent motor and edge to be dominant, to be great. And I think that you have to give a lot of credit, obviously, to the coaching staff, but I think in large part to Patrick Beverley for coming in and kind of changing and altering the course. And so I give him a lot of credit, But I will say this about the Minnesota Timberwolves, because they do not play the smartest style of basketball. Now, they win games because they've got better athletes. They've got some clutch scorers on the team, but they don't play smart basketball. They took a lot of ill-advised shots yesterday. Pull-up threes in transition. They weren't orchestrating offensive sets. They weren't orchestrating out of the half court. They were going ISO. Now, they made it, so ends up being all good. But long-term, it's hard to win when you're taking just ill-advised shots like that. So Karl-Anthony Towns can't be absent if they're going to have any chance of advancing. He scored 11 points, 3 for 11 shooting in 24 minutes, fouled out with 7 minutes left to go in the game. They're going to need him to be available. But again, if D'Angelo Russell can play like he did last night, not obviously 29 points, but if he can play like a borderline all-star with Karl-Anthony Towns, with Anthony Edwards, well, now there'll be a team to contend with. Because those two guys have obviously established themselves as guys that you can trust. But again, it'll be interesting to see kind of how far they can go, what types of performances they can get from D'Angelo Russell to pair with Edwards and with Karl-Anthony Towns. That to me is going to be the interesting thing. But again, from the Clippers' perspective, I think they still demonstrate the same feistiness, the same scrappiness, the same chemistry, camaraderie, and togetherness that they showed in the postseason last year. They still looked calm and collected even on the road. I still think Ty Lue is arguably the best coach in basketball, one of the top 3 coaches in the NBA today. And yes, I know that they're trying to reintegrate Paul George. I still think that the chemistry that they've built from last year's postseason run is still kind of just muscle memory. But it was surprising that they didn't close this game out, because this is typically the type of game that they would have closed out last year. Now, again, they're not out of it. They still have one more playing game to take on the winner between the Spurs and the Pelicans. But for now, they got to wait and see. They got to wait and see, and they'll have to play another playing game. Okay, we're going to step aside for a quick 30-second break. When I come back, I'm going to preview the other 2 playing games, the Charlotte Hornets and the Atlanta Hawks, San Antonio Spurs, and the New Orleans Pelicans. That's coming up in 30 seconds. All right, welcome back to Morning Joe. So, I want to preview the final two remaining NBA play-in games that are taking place tonight. Charlotte Hornets and the Atlanta Hawks, and the San Antonio Spurs and the New Orleans Pelicans. So let's start with the Charlotte Hornets and the Atlanta Hawks. So for me, this is interesting because both of these two teams, I had them finishing in different positions coming into this postseason. The Charlotte Hornets were one of the teams that I thought could surprise a few folks and actually make the playoffs, let alone the play-in tournament. So the fact that they are in the play-in tournament, I'm pleased to see that. The Atlanta Hawks, though, this is a team that should have been vying for a top 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, no one is suggesting that because they reached the Eastern Conference Finals last season that they should have been the prohibitive favorite to return. No one was suggesting that. But I do think that in this instance, their experience, the star power they have with Trae Young, I think will be a little bit too much for the Charlotte Hornets. I love LaMelo Ball. I absolutely think he is special. Now, I don't know if he quite has the killer instinct as of yet to match that of his counterpart in Trae Young. I like what they're seeing out of Miles Bridges. I like Terry Rozier. I think it hurts them in this instance that they don't have Gordon Hayward playing, but you still have Montrezl Harrell, who's been kind of dominant on the glass. So I like some of the pieces that they have on this team. I'm just concerned that their inexperience in this position is going to hurt them. The Hawks have been here before. They've played in big games. They're going to be hosting them at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta. And you look at the Atlanta Hawks roster, again, it's not just Trae Young. You've got Bogdanovich. You've got Clint Capella. You've got Danilo Gallinari coming off the bench. You've got DeAndre Hunter that's still there. So they've got some depth. They've got some size. Kevin Huerter. They've got shooting. I like Nate McMillan. I think he's done a fantastic job. I'm glad that he got to see through the remainder of last season. I'm glad that they signed him to be the legitimate head coach, not on just an interim basis, to be their full-time head coach. I'm happy for him. And so, again, I just think that in this spot, as much as I think LaMelo Ball can shine, and again, the Hornets have 4 guys that are scoring 15 or more points per game. The problem is one of them, in Gordon Hayward, isn't playing. He's still injured, which is a shame for them that they haven't been able to do with him much of the year. So I think in this instance, the Atlanta Hawks are ultimately going to win that play-in game and advance to play the Cavs for the final play-in spot. So I say the Hawks are going to win that matchup. And in the Western Conference with the San Antonio Spurs and the New Orleans Pelicans, this one is difficult. This one's tough. I think that you have the storylines with the San Antonio Spurs, the floating, unspoken rumor. Is this Greg Popovich's last year coaching in the NBA? Certainly makes for compelling television. And the Spurs have been one of those teams where even though it's felt like they have a bunch of disparate parts, Keldon Johnson, DeJounte Murray, Jakob Poeltl, you don't really know Lonnie Walker. You have so many kind of disparate parts on this team. You have Doug McDermott, that you're not really sure who the San Antonio Spurs are, but they're in this spot. And I do really like DeJounte Murray. I do really like him. They've got Zach Collins as well. There's a bunch of guys that you'd forget are on this team. Trey Jones, yet they are on this team and they do play. And they kind of have this chip on their shoulder. So it's easy to just discount them and rule them out in this situation, but I don't think you can just dismiss them like that. On the flip side, with the Pelicans, they obviously have more star power. They've got Brandon Ingram. They've got C.J. McCollum. I don't know if their depth is quite the same. The fact that Zion Williamson is not playing is a shame for basketball fans. I think we're all disappointed because if Zion Williamson were to join the Pelicans team that traded for C.J. McCollum for the second half of the year since the All-Star break, well, now I think they'd be a much more formidable team Herbert Jones has been a really fantastic rookie guard. He's got length, he's got height, plays with a lot of confidence. You still have Devontae Graham, who can stretch the floor and can light up any team at any given moment in time. Now, he hasn't been consistent, which has been his problem, but I still like the Pelicans overall, their roster. So I'm probably going to take the Pelicans here for tonight against the Spurs. But again, with Popovich, with the uncertainty surrounding his head coaching mortality and how much longer he's going to stick around, would I be completely shocked if the Spurs pulled off some huge miracle here? Not really. But I think it's going to be the Pelicans winning and the Hawks winning. Two of the home teams advancing to play in the final playing game. So those are my predictions. Okay, final topic again. I was going to be ending a couple minutes shorter today. My Malkins moments. I have two really great Malkins moments for that I want to touch on. So the first is in the MLB. So the San Francisco Giants' Alyssa Nakken, who's 31 years old, became the first woman to coach on the field in an MLB game. This took place last night. The San Francisco Giants beat the San Diego Padres 13-2 last night. Nakken came in to coach first base for the Giants in the third inning after Antoine Richardson was ejected. And the 31-year-old Nakken, she actually created this history just a couple days after other history was made in baseball. Rachel Balkovich became the first woman to manage a minor league affiliate of a Major League Baseball team. She coached she guided the New York Yankees' Class A Tampa club actually to a win in her first game, but that took place 4 days ago. But for Nakken, she was a former actual softball star at Sacramento State from 2009 to 2012, was an all-conference player. She became really the first woman coach to be a part of the big leagues when Gabe Kapler hired her to be a part of his staff with the Giants in 2020. Now she got her chance to be on the first base line, and hopefully that's one of many that we continue to see from her and for females and women in the sport of baseball. Great to see it, and very much deserving of being one of my Malkins moments. The second Malkins moment came last night for Anthony Edwards. So he scored 30 points to help lead the Minnesota Timberwolves over the LA Clippers to clinch the 7th seed and a playoff berth. They'll take on the Memphis Grizzlies on Saturday to begin that series. But with his 30 points in his performance last night, he's now moved into the top 4 in NBA history for the most points scored before the age of 21. If you look at the top 5 scorers in NBA history before the age of 21, you have LeBron, who has scored the first most with 4,649. Kevin Durant is second with 3,495 points. Carmelo Anthony is third with 3,283. Now you've got Anthony Edwards, who's in there at number 4 with 2,925 points. And Luka Doncic rounds out the top 5. He's got 2,899 points. So officially, Anthony Edwards surpassed Luka Doncic with his performance last night. And again, he's been having one of those special seasons where second year in the league, he's starting to figure out everything. The team's playing well, and now they've officially qualified for the postseason. So we'll see how they continue to do from that. That'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_. Instagram, JMalkin97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. As always, have a lovely rest of your morning.